Hello, this is a video for project 2 in our class where we're going to make some kind of a pirate island environment. Kind of like these research pictures here that I just pulled off of Google Images. We're going to be inspired generally by these. And the first step in this process is going to be using a new technique in Blender called texture displacement. So we're going to use a noise texture to drive the displacement of our land here, so that we can get some truly random islands, and we will sculpt our little town or our pirate hideout on our islands in subsequent videos. So to get started, let me back out of this and get us back to neutral. So let's start a new Blender project here. And let's add a plane. Shift A, mesh, a plane. Come down here and click where when you add something new, you get a little dialog box. Let's make it 100 meters for right now. We may scale it up, but 100 meters square. Tab will take you to edit mode. You can right click and subdivide. Down here in the number of cuts, let's put 100. So now we have a plane that is divided into 100 cuts, many pieces. And we can use this plane as our land, and we need to use a noise texture to make each of these vertexes rise and fall to a different height. And what we're going to do, there are differing ways to do this, but we're going to get into something called geometry nodes. Geometry nodes are a relatively new thing in Blender that you can use to do many different things. And we're going to use geometry nodes to do noise displacement. I'm going to clean up my windows here. I don't need this other window over here. So if you mouse over the joint between windows and you drag over, then you can make that go away. We're in the Geometry Nodes tab, which you should see. So when you get here, you can click New, Geometry Nodes. So we have messed with shading nodes a little bit. Geometry nodes are going to be similar, but of course completely different, so that anything you may have learned and felt comfortable with is now of no use to you whatsoever. I'm going to refer to my chart over here earlier where I figured this out, because they're constantly updating Blender and changing the geometry nodes. So it's always changing just a little bit. What you have in geometry nodes, you may have seen something very similar to this in DaVinci Resolve, where they have fusion nodes or various other software. Everything is going to node-based software now. And what we can do is so if we have nothing selected, I would have thought that would disappear. Anyway, these nodes, this geometry node setup, relates to this plane. It belongs to this plane. If I do stuff to these nodes, it does stuff to the plane. You can see that in Blender, geometry nodes function as a type of modifier. If I close that modifier, the nodes are gone. Over here, I can probably add a geometry nodes modifier, and I'm back with my nodes. Now, what would you want to do? Well, the first node we're going to add is called a set position node. So Shift A and search for set position. We can set the position of the plane wherever we want by using the set position node. You can make it go up and down. But we can set the position not just to an absolute value, but to a complex set of values based on the inputs that we put into this side of the set position. Right. So what do we want to do next? Offset. Offset will allow us to offset the position. So let's search for another node. Shift A, search. What if we just search for a noise texture and plug the factor into the offset? Right away, we get an offset of the plane based on the noise texture. So if I change the scale of the noise texture, it'll change the scale of the displacement. If I change the make sure you can see this. Yeah, if I change the detail, the roughness, some of these do different things at different times, but we don't need to mess with them right now. Okay. So we would like to be able to affect how tall this is, right? Just messing with the scale and the detail is not giving us mountains. So what we want to do first is we'd like to put in a, what is this node called? Vector math node. Some of these nodes will make sense and some of them will, it will make sense later. Let's grab a vector math node, drop it in here, and set it, turn it from add to scale. Where is scale? Where is scale? There it is. Cool. Scale. Now we're already able to have more control by moving the scale. We have a lot more control over the intensity, right? We can make it super displaced, which is very interesting and not super useful. And we can plug, what did I do here? We can plug a normal into the, wait, this is on the vector. What's that into? Meow meow multiply scale. Scale, really? Interesting. All right, let's set some things up here. Just bear with me. Shift A, search, add a math node. Set it to multiply. And scale. Normal vector. There we go. So what I have done now is I have my noise texture. It's still going into the set position node through these other nodes. So we're controlling how it offsets the plane. Multiply helps us increase the intensity of the offset by multiplying the noise texture by a value. So if we change that, we get more or less offset. And the normal makes it, you could see when I first did this, it was offsetting at a skewed angle. Very, very, very not useful, very strange. Normal makes it offset in the direction of the face of the plane, right? So a plane or any face in 3D software has a normal, which is the direction that is perpendicular to its face. Sure. It's up from the center of the face is the normal, perpendicular to its face. So this, putting the normal into the vector, lets it go up and down instead of off to the side or some weird direction like that. So already here we can control our scale, we can control the height with the value in the multiply node. Let's keep going. We can do more things. Let's go ahead at this point, and you can see our geometry for this plane is still being referenced by this group input node. We can make this stop being so incredibly spiky if we start off with a subdivision surface node and just drop that on there. And then we can increase the level. Be careful with this because based on your computer's capabilities, you may slow down or even freeze Blender by increasing this too dramatically. But we can put it at 1 or 2 for now. Hmm. Okay, here we go. So now we're getting somewhere. We put on the subdivision surface modifier, which is smoothing it out a little bit. You can see it's a lot more smooth. And now with this setup that we've got going on here, when I change the scale to something very, very low, we're getting very, very smooth ripples, right? So all of these different things that you can change affect dramatically the output of what you're getting. If you're not getting something that you want, then you need to mess around with and come to understand these various things that you can control, right? So now we're starting to get somewhere. Let's do a little bit more. So this scale is such a low number. We can create a easier to control value so that when we try to drag it, we're not like dramatically losing what we have. So let's plug another math node into there. Value into scale. Let's divide the search for a value. I don't really have to do that. I don't really have to do that. Zero, 5. What you want to do here is empower yourself to move your mouse at a normal speed and get the amount of change in your work that you're looking for so that it doesn't get out of control, so you don't have like dramatic spikiness that you can't work with. I was going to put a value node in here, but that's the same as just putting an input into this value slot. So we don't need that. And the last thing that we will do here for this is noise texture add. Let's put a math node, add into the vector, and put position. Whoa, that's not it. Vector math? Yeah. Let's add a vector math node. Vector to vector, search, position. Great. Does that effectively do nothing? Totally does. What do we get out of that? Control? We get control. Very good. So now what we would like to do is, now that we've added this vector math node that sets the position of it to just be, so the vector is the position in space, right? It's 3 coordinates on the XYZ plane. Where is this thing? X, Y, Z. This is where it's at. By adding this vector math node and adding to the position with X, Y, Z, we can move the noise texture and thereby get a different section of the noise texture than what we're getting now. And what's valuable about that is we want to be able to use the noise to craft a unique island that we like. We want to be able to choose our island, right? So to make that a little more apparent, what I'm going to do at this point is put another plane in here. I think I'll just duplicate this one. Shift D and I'll hit escape so it stays in exactly the same place. But for that one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to um, greatly calm down the intensity of what's going on here. In order to do that, I'm going to grab these nodes and drag them over here. I'm going to add a color ramp in between here. And what will happen is the black will be the lowest point of the displacement. And so if I raise that up, it becomes flat. and the white becomes the highest point. So if I were to lower that down, it would go down and become the lowest point. So the relationship between these two colors, basically it's clamping the value difference that can be set. Um, did I lose my other one? They're sharing the exact same geometry nodes. That's cool. Why would that be true? Oh, okay. So if you look right here, these two objects are using the same geometry nodes. You can do this with materials. I actually didn't know that you could do it with geometry nodes. You can see here, 2. If you click that, or if you click the 2 that was right there, they'll just become their own nodes once again. That is good for us because we want one of them to stay really a lot, and one of them to be very little. This plane is going to be our water, and so I only want it to displace just a little bit just for fun so that we have a little ripple to our water. When we put this scene in Unreal Engine, we'll use an Unreal water texture um, that will look a lot better. But we just need something for demonstration purposes to show us where we're at. Whoa. All right, I'm going to mess around here with the scale a little bit and mess around with the color ramp just a little bit so I can get something that's pretty flat, kind of looks like water, looks all right. And then I'm going to just grab it in the layout here, G, Z, pull it down until it looks like I have some islands. Now what we want to do is select the other one, the one that's going to be our islands, and we want to play with the controls that we have available to us until we're getting an appropriate sized island. Right? Remember, we can move it around using these controls. You can even move it on the Z, which means that the 3D, the noise texture is actually 3D, and we only see it as it passes through this plane, which is kind of cool. But let's work on, not that. Let's work on getting some islands just by playing with the scale here. And we can mess with the color ramp to have more dramatic islands. I don't want to be too dramatic. You can always move your water down to sort of affect what you're getting. And don't forget that in your noise texture, I have the water selected. Have the water selected. In your noise texture, you can mess with these settings as well. Whoa, that's a good one. And so now what we're looking for is stuff that looks like islands. Great. So let's see if we can find some kind of a thing that looks like pirates would hide out there just by scrolling around through the noise texture. See if we can find something that is kind of unique. You can add a mix node and put it in here and duplicate all of these nodes and then mix them together. Maybe we should do that. That's making things a little more complicated, but I'm sure you can handle it. Mix is going to do it. Could be. Oh, yeah, that's making our islands a little more interesting. Oh, maybe it's not helping at all. Maybe we can just go back, stick to what we had. There we go. All right. All right, this looks kind of promising. So this looks like a little cove or a bay here. We can change the water height to kind of figure out what's going to work for us. We can, of course, mess with the, I still have the water selected. I'm the best. We can mess with the, where the bottom is and where the top is. Now we're getting into some islands here that are kind of interesting. So you just kind of have to feel it out artistically. What do you think will work for you? So now we have some terrain here. It looks kind of cool. We can, if your computer can handle it, you can always try to ramp up the subdivision surface there to give you even smoother land. You can mess with the noise texture detail to give you, oh, maybe not that, a little more interesting detail. And this is looking pretty cool. Now you need to think about at this point where your town or your little castle or whatever we're going to design, where it's going to be. I'm kind of thinking that this might be a good little spot here. I can see that the top of my mountain is getting clipped off here. That's actually because the top there, the white, is just too crunched. It's getting flattened out by the clamp. There we go, too far. Back up a little bit. Nice. All right, let's start doing some color so we can figure out what we want to do. So let's go down to, so for geometry nodes, that's basically it. You can see the, let's look at the exact node tree here really closely so you guys can see. I've already put a screenshot of this node tree up on to the Moodle. But let's look at it. Let's look at it together, and we'll do this. We'll do this in class as well. So what on earth is happening here? Okay, we have group input. That's where our geometry is going into geometry nodes. It's referencing the plane. And we have group output. All the stuff that we've done in geometry nodes is being sent to the plane to do stuff to it. In between group input and group output, we have really two things. Let's just move these out of the way. Between the input and the output, there's two things. Subdivision surface, which makes it all smooth, and set position, which just says set the position of this plane somewhere. Where are we going to set it? Well, the only input other than geometry that's being input is offset. So we'll take the default position of the plane, we'll offset it. How will we offset it? If you were to put a value in here, it would just move it. But this offsets it by a noise texture. If you remember, when we plugged just the noise texture into the offset, it offset it noisily. Everything else that we're doing is affecting how that noise offsets the plane. So we weren't getting enough out of it. So in between the noise texture and the offset, we added a multiply and a scale, and we told it to scale via the normal. So this is the scale node is a vector math node. One of the things I don't like about Blender is when you see nodes like this, you can't always tell what they are. There is no add node. It's a math node where you select add. This is the same node. Oh, that's a vector math node as well. So if they're purple, they're vector math nodes. So this and this are the same node, but one I selected add and one of them I selected scale. Kind of silly. But all of this is to say that we are controlling the noise texture via a color ramp. We're scaling it up via multiply. So we're taking the value coming out and multiplying it by a number so that it becomes much larger, so that the mountains become taller. And because the noise texture is a black and white image, right, Using the black and white color ramp clamps the contrast and the relative values between them, so it changes the relative heights of the mountain. And all that remains is stuff that we're feeding into the vector and scale of the noise texture, this one, so that we can change the scale much more subtly. So when I was changing the scale, it was changing from 0 to 100 really fast. So I plugged a math node into the scale where I am dividing these two numbers so that the when I change one of these numbers, the difference in scale changes very, very slowly, right? Does it really need to be 0.9? Couldn't that just be 1? Oh, I screwed up everything. Okay, careful what you do. And position just tells it to reference its current position, and then we can add to its current position, and thereby move the noise texture as it passes through the plane. So it's like the noise texture is a light that we're shining onto the plane, and where light spots hit, the plane is going up, and where dark spots hit, the plane is going down. We'll talk much more about this in class, but I hope that's apparent for now. Once you have done something in geometry nodes that you are satisfied with, you can come back here to modifiers, and you can apply it. So I can grab the mountains and click apply from this drop-down menu. And now that is just a mesh that is shaped like this. You can't change it. You can change it, but you can't change it with geometry nodes anymore unless you were to add more geometry nodes. And I'm going to apply the water one as well. All of this slows down your computer, so if you're sure you're done, apply them, and then that's it. You could always come back and recreate this randomly if you wanted to. Now that we sort of have, let me go back to layout. Now that we sort of have some mountains, none of this is really flat enough to put a little base or town or hideout or whatever it is. So I'm going to select the mountain here. I'm going to tab into edit mode, and I want to select a big chunk of it and sort of flatten it out for a good place to have a town. There's different, we've all discovered in class how you can get different selections over here. You can also push W. The circle one we frequently find ourselves on when we don't want to be on. It's a great one actually for doing something like this. I'm going to up the radius here significantly so I can select a big chunk. And I'm going to go over here and turn on wireframe. And you know what, let me hide the water. I'm going to select the water in object mode and hit H. And select the mountains, go back to wireframe. Yeah, that was cool. And make sure that, what is this called? Ghost? X-ray. Toggle X-ray so that you select through. You don't want to select just some limited stuff. And lastly, I'm going to select proportional editing up here. So tab into edit mode, and I'm going to select this whole general sort of landmass here. I think this would be a good spot for the port town that we're going to build here. And it's just it's too tall. I'm going to hit scale S, Z, the Z axis, drag my mouse down. And because my proportional editing is turned on, it's affecting other vertices, but the proportional editing is not doing anything. Why? Did it not turn on? It turned off proportional editing for me. Thank you, Blender. I'm going to turn it back on. G, nope, that's wrong. S, Z. Is it frozen? Don't die, Blender. It's flipping out. Yeah, the level of detail that you choose to use in your simulation here, in your geometry nodes, can really slow down your computer. There it goes. So you may want to do fewer subdivisions than I'm doing to start off with, because I'm working with a significantly powerful computer here, and it was not happy with what I did. But you can see that I'm scaling down on the Z-axis. this mountainous area, and by scrolling my mouse wheel while using proportional editing, let me just go back, scale. Oh, it's going to take forever again. By scrolling my mouse wheel while I'm doing proportional editing, I'm affecting how large of an area of other unselected vertices are being selected. Because if you do too many, the whole map will get done. If you do too few, you'll be like creating this cliff here, which nobody wants, right? So let me select a lot, so that a lot is affected there. Let me choose the right amount of crushage there, and let's move it down a little bit too. I'll move the whole thing down a little bit into the water, if it will do it. So if you find yourself stuck and your computer can't handle this, you could just start over, do fewer subdividing cuts in the very beginning, and also you could just skip that subdivision surface node completely. But now we have a much more relatively flattish area for us to put something interesting, but it's still surrounded by super interesting mountains. Let's Alt H to bring back our water, which may now be a bit too high. Let's just select that and GZ. Bring it down so that we're getting uh, good stuff for a little town. This is almost enough for our first part of this, because it will take you some figuring out and some practice to get a good area that you want to use to put your environment. But we can at least select a color for the water. We can add a light that is a sun and rotate it so that it is pretty cool. And we can select the mountains here, the land. We can go to shading and add a color to that as well. And instead of just choosing a color, I can just choose a color, but that's not super interesting. I'll put another color ramp into the base color. Now it's black and whitish. I'll choose maybe like a green, light color, and I'll choose maybe like a dark brown. And you can see that's not doing anything. And you can use a noise texture, plug the factor into the factor. So factor, what does that mean? You chose brown and green on this color ramp. Which parts should be brown? How much of it should be brown, and how much of it should be green? If we make it 0, it'll be all the way brown, and make it 1, it'll be all the way green. But the factor doesn't have to be a linear value either. It can be a random value. And so if I scroll up my noise texture here, um, I can control that. And on the color ramp, I can also use more colors. And so by sort of carefully choosing realistic-ish colors, you can work your way towards getting something a lot more interesting and realistic. Looks like we got a lot of shininess going on here, so we'll turn down the specular, turn up the roughness a little bit, and we can use our noise texture details here to sort of give it more interest. There we go. Now we're getting somewhere. If you have, so you're going to want to turn on Node Wrangler, Edit, Preferences. There it is. Add-ons. You should have Node Wrangler checked right here. And if you do, then a lot of things that you select, you can hit Control T and get some good stuff. Like here's some mapping. So if we feel like this is squishy, we could scale it on the Z so that it is a little more even. Makes sense. Was that happening because the object is scaled? Nope. It's fine. We don't need to apply scale. And so you can see this texture is kind of heading in an interesting, moderately, somewhat slowly realistic direction here. Just gotta be careful what you do. And by changing the position of these, you change what percentage of each thing or each color or their relative relationships. You can kind of see what looks cool. All right, so not too bad. So now we're doing pretty well here. This is a very interesting little island layout here that we will be able to begin using to build our environmental scene on. And you can use displacement on any mesh in the world. If you set it up the same exact way, you can displace with a logo and make a embossed thing. You can use any sort of image or texture, not just a noise texture, to displace geometry. As long as there are enough subdivisions and you have enough topology like we do here. I think that's enough for now, but we'll be talking about this more, and I'm really looking forward to going forward with this project. Thanks a lot.